Hi guys, going to talk through how to find percentages using multipliers. It's much easier to use this method to find percentages. It's particularly useful if you've got a calculator. You might be good at doing it without, but certainly when you get to doing GCSE maths, Key Stage 4 maths, you're going to need to know this method because there are hard percentage questions they could ask to do with interest rates and things that it would just take too long to use an older method with. Okay, so here's an example we're going to introduce it with. We need to find 15% of £50. So the way you might have done this before is to find nice easy chunks that make up 15%. Now, the original amount is always 100%. It's important to start there. So when we're talking about easy chunks, maybe 10% would be a go-to one that you would normally use because 10% is 1/10 of 100%, and therefore you divide by 10 to find 10%. So 10% would be £5. I need to find 15%, so I need another 5%, and that will be half of 10%. So half of £5 will be £2.50. If I add those together, I'll have 15%, and 15% will be £7.50. So that was one way to do it. That's the way you're probably most familiar with so far. Not a hard method at all, but if the percentage we were asked to find was any more difficult, maybe 16% or 1.2%, then finding nice chunks that make those amounts gets a little bit harder. Another method people like to use to find any percentage is just to use 1% chunks. So here we used a 10% chunk and a 5% chunk, but you can actually make any amount using 1% chunks. So we're starting back at this point, 100% is £50. Now how would you find 1%? How many ones go into 100? Well, there are 100 ones in 100, so we would always divide by 100 to find 1%. So 1% here would be 50p. And then we can just multiply that by whatever we need to find 15%. So clearly we need to multiply here by 15. So 15% is £7.50. Now you might think that method's a bit harder because you might not be able to multiply this by 15 in your head, but it makes it a lot quicker on a calculator than having to remember what certain chunks are and having to write down all of these steps. Okay, so that's the 1% chunk method. Now, the more we do this, the better we're going to get at doing this in one step, and this is really the key behind using multipliers. So what we've just done there is divided by 100 and times by 15. Could we merge those into one step? The answer is yes. When we divide by 100, we could put that on the bottom of a fraction. When we multiply by 15, that could go on top of the fraction. So when we multiply by that fraction, it's the same as doing this. It's the same as dividing by 100 and timesing by 15. I'm sure you'll have heard that when we're finding a fraction of an amount, we always divide by the bottom number in the fraction and multiply by the top number. So that would take us straight to our answer, £7.50. Okay, might seem a little bit hard, but remember your calculator can multiply by fractions quite easily using the fraction button. But what if you didn't have a calculator with a fraction button? People still need to be able to do this. And the key is to be able to convert fractions into decimals, which is very easy, especially when they're out of 100. So hopefully you know that 15 hundredths is equal to 0.15. Okay, so when you just divide something by 100, the decimal point moves twice to the left. Now if we just multiply by 0.15, it's exactly the same as multiplying by 15 over 100. And I'm sure you can imagine that that's much easier to do on a calculator, and you can even do it on calculators that don't have a fraction button. So people who deal with percentages every day in their field of work will be very familiar with this method. And this is what we call a decimal multiplier. A much quicker way of doing it than finding chunks. And not very hard either. So let's recap what we did. To find any percentage of a number, first convert the percentage to a decimal. Now we didn't have to turn it into a fraction first. Very easy to turn a percentage directly into a decimal. All we do is divide it by 100. We then multiply that decimal by the number. So this of turns into a multiply, and we multiply it by the £50 that we're trying to find 15% of. And there's our answer. Okay. This becomes particularly useful when we're trying to increase or decrease amounts by a percentage. So the old way you might have done a question like this, and perhaps still the non-calculator way you might choose to do it, is to think that 100% is £50. We need to find 15% the way we would have before, using nice chunks. Okay, and then you would add together the amounts, so £50 plus £7.50 gives us £57.50. Using a multiplier, we can do it much quicker. So here's the same question again. Now, up in this bit, we did the adding in the amount stage. We added the amount of pounds together to get our answer. But what if we had added in the earlier stage? What if we had added in the percentage stage instead? Okay, so 100% plus 15% is 115%. And that's what this number is as a percentage of the original amount. Okay, it's 115%. So the way they could have asked this question is just to say, find 115% of £50. It's exactly the same as saying increase £50 by 15%. And remember from the previous slide, we can, to find any percentage of a number, we turn this into a decimal by dividing by 100. So that would give us 1.15. This of turns into a times, and we timed it by the amount, and that would take us straight to the answer. Much quicker and much easier as well, especially when it comes to finding hard percentages. 15% is quite an easy one. Okay, how would we use it for a decrease question? Let's say we wanted to decrease a shirt or something which costs £50 by 15%. So the old way would have been to say that the original amount is £50, work out 15%, take that away, and we get our answer. Using a multiplier, we're going to do the taking away in the percentage stage. Take away 15% from 100%, that leaves 85%. So this amount, £42.50, is 85% of the old amount. So they could have just asked this as the question. It's exactly the same thing. Decrease £50 by 15% is the same as finding 85% of £50. So we turn it into a decimal, we times it by 50, we get the same answer.